It is said that babies don't choose their parents. But what if? What if our spiritual forms choose the vessels from whom we will breathe life, to give us access to a particular set of experiences that will inform our paths and our purpose? How do some of us harness our ancestral energies to be unique, to be exceptional, to be powerful? I am your host, Stephanie Renee, and these are the questions we will explore in Continuum. This is a time when a lot of creatives are questioning what our role is in this moment, this human moment that we are experiencing. And there is a lot of anxiety around that. And I think that very similar to maybe about 5 years ago, where a lot of my creative friends decided to go back to grad school and get degrees so that they could be present in academia.
Right.
And sort of merge the creative spirit around the spirit of learning so that we can instill this kind of energy into a new generation of folks who are entering into the world and finding their place.
Yeah.
Right now, I think the lessons that we have from our ancestors and the idea that creatives are now inserting ourselves into all different facets of society,
right,
which to me is thrilling. And it also is about this, what I've decided to name this series is Continuum.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we are taking, that t-shirt that says, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams.
Yep.
We are taking all of that and we are now giving energy to I'm taking what I've learned and who I've been, and now I'm transforming it into ways that will make this world a better place.
Right.
And that's not going to look the same way for everybody, but that is where we are. And that's why I was so excited to get a chance to talk to you about how this is manifesting in your life.
Ha.
So for the benefit of, I'll edit this so that it's clean.
All right.
Conversation. But for the benefit of the people who were not necessarily listeners to my former radio show when I was with WURD, you and I first met in person, which was wonderful, when you came in as a guest of Mike Dennis and for his show, Real Black Presents.
Right.
And this was a chance for us to talk about your one-woman show, bringing it to Philadelphia, and this journey for you in terms of telling your story autobiographically through these vignettes that you put together for the show. So talk to us about that first.
Well, what's interesting, I will say, about the journey of Fried Chicken and Latkes, which is about growing up being Black and Jewish, is I've been in development the last 2 years with MGM and Sony Norman Lear. To turn it into a television series. And it is a labor intensive love. Its highs and its lows, which to me really reflect right now. And I'll tell you why, because you have the people you want to help you create this, and you bring in, like, we've brought in some writers, because I'm not a television writer. I can write a play, I can, but learning a new structure. So I'm like learning on my feet as we do this. So bringing in those who know how to do this voice, but even if they are African American, and I'll tell you this, writing to a certain culture, because that's the norm.
Yeah.
And then having to go, okay, no, this isn't it. And then you have to like fold that writer, and you're like, and you start all over again with another one. And and then you find the one that's kind of still doesn't get what the story is, and you're like, no. And then you wind up with a fabulous, woman of color who gets the time period, gets the risk that's involved to tell this story, especially since it takes place in the 1970s and 80s, with this authenticity of racial divide and the conversations that will ensue. And the idea of all of it is to spark conversation in your home.
Yeah.
So that brings me back to fried chicken and latkes. The reason for the whole show in general, even the touring show, was about having that conversation, was about, is the whoever is watching, somehow they get something that sparks that, either having a question in their head about their own bias, or laughing because they relate to that time period, or maybe they were that person, maybe they were Rain, when you're like, I'm part of both, why do I have to choose, you know?
Yeah.
um it's so funny that it's so right now. And what we are creating, like I said, really is, this is, I feel like it's an exciting time creatively to either really confront and not be afraid, and unapologetic about who we are in our process as voices of the diaspora, period.
Yes. Absolutely. In that idea of the show for the now, and how it so closely relates to what we're going through.
Yeah.
You are recently married. You have this beautiful little one. How are you all engaging conversations about the protests, about just what we are seeing as a community? Because a lot of parents right now are struggling with how deep down the rabbit hole do we go with the realities of what people are speaking up about and what's happening between the police and the citizens with younger people.
You know, it's interesting. So in our family, we have a very big blended family to begin with. So, you know, my daughter's father is a police officer. My husband is a white man. You know, and my daughter is a product of me and of her dad, and has, you know, has the light skin and the big hair, and is very aware, because everything she sees and touches, she's very aware of what's going on. There's no going down the rabbit hole. It, like, that happened with social media, you know, like,
Yeah.
that's just a part of the world that we live in. And having conversation, real conversation around what it means to be Black in America right now. And, you know, and it's great because I do have a partner in Dave where, you know, I can have this conversation and about race, about how I feel. I can talk about whiteness, or how I feel a lot of the liberal whites are taking over, like, what do you call it, culturally appropriating Black Lives Matter movement at the moment. Like, I can have this real conversation with my husband and not feel, and I don't think he feels like that threat of, oh no, I can't say, or I'm gonna, you know, like, it's real dialogue because it's happening. And we need to, you know, kind of navigate this road at the moment, for who we are. And even, you know, I even had to talk with my mom this morning about it, because, you know, she was around, you know, she was around the people like Dick Gregory. You know, here's a white woman, blonde hair, blue eye, who knew Dick Gregory, who knew the Black Panthers, because that's who my mom was at the time. You know, who, you could say it was cultural appropriation because she knew so much about, you know, the Black American experience, you know, and because too, she was married to my dad and had, you know, me, who doesn't look like everybody else. So you have to have those conversations, you know, or you could try not to, you know, but to listen to her even say, everything feels convoluted. Everything feels right now like the message that we should have, like, it's, she said it, and I said it too, we agreed that it feels like, because of everything's being convoluted about race right now, that we are on this edge of, are we going to move forward all together, or are we going to go back and to be segregated? And what are we choosing?
Right.
You know, like even as woke as we think we are, we have to be careful in the conversation we're trying to have and what that intention is, because this is the opportunity that the people who wanted segregation have been waiting for. This is the opportunity to me that, you know, our current, and I don't know if I can say this, you can edit it out, you know, our current racist in chief would want, or supremacist in chief would want to have happen, because it allows him to bring in the military. It's like everything, it's like, be careful, people, what you're asking for and what you're wishing for, because you're falling into the trap. It's like, and it's frustrating. And then it makes me feel older, right? Like, I'm like, because then I'm like, oh, it's a generational thing.
Yeah.
You know, like our generation and above, you know, really fought the fight, you know, really fought that fight, and we're in those trenches. And nowadays it's such a me and I versus them, and let's divide and let's get rid of, instead of let's face it. Like somehow if dismantling and getting rid of everything's gonna fix it, and I'm like, no, it has to be dealt with, because you can't patch a hole with, you know what I mean, with the dead animal inside of it. It's still gonna smell like a dead animal.
Yes.
You know, you have to, we have to literally break and fix and restructure and have that conversation on how this is going to be done for the purpose of all of us that live here together.
Yeah. That's a perfect segue, actually, because one of the things that I think everybody argues about in moments like this is the role of politics.
Yeah.
Because understanding that politics means compromise does not appease the people who want sort of instant revolution.
Right.
And picking and choosing where you place yourself in these times where we know change is necessary, how we achieve change is debatable.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you said that, only because, so, and you brought up, you know, when we talked about the ancestors, right? Yeah. So in what I practice in my life personally, you know, Ifa for the year just said, like, we're not supposed to enter into chaos. Mm-hmm. So we're supposed to, like, you know, it's like watching everything happen in front of you on a television screen, and you're not allowed to participate in the chaos. Ancestrally, we're just not, because they're supposed to be taking care of stuff for us, and that's why all of this is coming up. And how the us versus them is a breakdown of our society that has placed many of us in the reactionary position on purpose. Like this, then it goes, then I take it even a step further and then go back to, okay, then we're really seeing the effects of post-traumatic slave syndrome. Mm-hmm. We're seeing the I'm going to not only pit you, but I'm going to pit the white person again against the Black person who doesn't necessarily agree in the let's defund, let's get rid of, so then you're not Black anymore. You know, you've lost your race card. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. we're so on, you're right, we're so on this really fine line of all or nothing. And I think a lot of that has to do with the era that we live in, which isn't all or nothing. You know, we delete, we swipe, we block like that. So people think like that's how we're supposed to be living, but they're not thinking through the actual consequences of all this. You know, we're built on a foundation of systemic racism. We're built on it. That's America, you know? Yeah. So to dismantle that is going to take a conscious effort, and it's going to take time if we are to sustain it through the generations. Right. This is not something that happens overnight. It's not just the police department's fault. It's our legislators. That's when you politic. It's our legislators' fault. Black, white, in between, whatever. It's the fact that nobody's ever thought to change those policies, to confront them and say, you know what, this actually isn't just.
Yeah.
You know, like we need to really look at this and change how we we need to really focus on how the police officers in training get trained to target minorities. You know, we're
Yes.
going to target the brown and the black person this way because of where they live and because they have no money, and we have to recognize that. But it's all psychological. It's like psychological warfare.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, as busy as you are in your creative storytelling and all the other things that you embrace, what was the moment where you said, politics, I can do that?
You know, it happened when my daughter was bullied in school. It's not a plan I ever had. Like, this wasn't something that I go, oh, you know, one day I'm going to, you know, run for city council. It really wasn't. But I am one of those, anyone who knows me well knows that if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And I might not always finish, but I show up.
Yes.
And it was one of those things that I showed up for. And I did do this kicking and screaming, you know, because I don't like the politics of politics. I don't like that circle, that game. And I think it's hard for people who really do want purposeful, actual change to be in the game of politics. You know, it's like, it's The Office. You know what I mean? It's entering, you know, you have the hierarchy and you have things that are already in position, and then they feel threatened that you're coming, and, you know, and the tactics that they use to push you back or keep you down. And you're seeing it on all levels, black and white. And then you go, oh, and then we wonder why the city is the way that it is, you know. And although I did not, as it looks at the moment, no, I did not win, but I did really well for, you know, like, I did well enough that people are like, you know, maybe you should think about running in the next 4 years. And then part of me goes, but is city council where I'm going to have the most impact? Like, maybe that's not where I belong. After this, maybe I belong as a delegate, or I belong in Congress because I really want to change policy. Yes, I want to change my neighborhood, but I want to affect policy.
Yes. Yes.
And
People should also know that when we say city council, we're talking about the city of Baltimore.
yes, city. Oh, sorry. Yes.
No. I say that very particularly in this moment, because when we look at geographic areas where this unrest, where this anger at the way police interact with people of color has bubbled and manifested into something raw and real, Baltimore is certainly one of the biggest examples of that in recent history. So even
5 years ago, we had our uprising.
Yeah, I mean, stepping into politics in Baltimore on the local level is a revolutionary act.
Right. But it is. And, you know, and I think people don't, I think that's where the next generation, the generation after my generation, I feel like sometimes, you know, like, and I bet our parents did the same thing. We're like, oh, if only they knew and they did it this way, you know, like, that's how I feel right now. If only you knew that you have to be organized, more organized than the organ, you know what I mean,
Yes.
that you were before. And so you can't do this blindly. You can't just say, you can verbalize whatever you want about the structures that put us in our place, whatever that is. But if you don't have a plan of action, you know, it doesn't go anywhere, because nobody cares like they did then. It was revolutionary when Martin Luther King Jr. was marching and Malcolm X was speaking on, you know, the street corners.
Yeah.
That was a different era. It was new in perspective, you know, and now it's like the same talking points, but if you don't put the action behind it, it's stalemate. It just sits there, you know. And because I am that, I understand, because I'm angry, I'm tired, I'm worn out. I feel like history keeps repeating itself. I get all that, and also I know I have to have a plan. I have to jump, and which is, again, putting like they go, the revolution will not be televised.
Oh, this time it will.
Right? Seriously. It's like it's being shouted from the rooftops, but it won't affect changes if we don't organize and plan and not allow it to get away from us, not get convoluted. It's like there was a part of me that was all excited when I saw a whole bunch of people in my area who were white, who protested, and you see on TV and you're like, oh, this is great. And I remember when my mom did that. And then I'm like, but where were you during Freddie Gray? And where were you, before that? And where were you when this was going on in your neighborhood? And, where were you when, I jumped into the race in Baltimore and your white counterpart person says I'm not Black enough, or challenges that because I'm for a different policy than him? Why didn't you jump on him and say, whoa, we don't do that.
Yeah.
It's deep.
Is.
It's really deep.
But that's why these personal narratives and people's individual journeys become a substantial part of the collective action, right? Everybody can't march every day. Everybody has to think about what their tools are and what their area of influence is and make a stand in that way. And then all these individual actions come together to move the entire system forward.
Part of the things that I'm doing now, is I'm working with two women. We're actually having a talk tomorrow because we did start a Facebook page on it's almost like the Green Book, but for Black owned businesses.
Nice.
So people can know where they are, know where to shop, to give, investment, white and Black. But it's specific to Black owned business, because we don't necessarily frequent. And, even if we say we do, we don't necessarily know who owns what all the time. And so we're creating that to put that out there. Just like with my TV series, it was really important that series resonates, whether it's uncomfortable or not, but it resonates with the person sitting in Minnesota or whatever that normally wouldn't see that reflected on television.
Right.
I want my daughter to look back and go, oh, I really do relate, not in a network kind of way, but in a realistic kind of way, to that girl. She looks like me,
Yes.
Those are the kind, so for me, those are the actions I'm taking, because to hold a sign and march down the street isn't going to do anything, but to have ran for office and now have the ear of the congressman, and now have the ear of certain people in power, and to be invited to go on the local radio news show here and talk about how we're going to move forward. That's what I can do to help bring about more change and activism. That's what activism, is.
Yes.
Instead of just talking about it, sitting on the couch, having my cup of coffee.
Well, I was like, as we both sip, yes.
Yeah.
But that was a great segue too, because your dad had a TV show.
Mm-hmm.
And it was revolutionary in every sense of the word.
It was so revolutionary, they took him off the air after, right? What is it, 4 shows or something?
And thank Mike Dennis. For those of you who have never checked out Real Black TV on YouTube, please go look through and see some of these wonderful archival pieces that he's pulled together that you may have missed because of situations like Rain and I get ready to talk about. But your dad's show is so important in this conversation.
Yes.
Because the network gave him access because of his fame, because of the reputation he had built up for making people uncomfortable. And then they got it. and he assembled an amazing array of other comedic actors to come on with him, and they used the tool of comedy. But the content of the show was incredibly political, was incredibly cultural.
Right. And after a while, they were like, okay, we gotta, because this is too much power for one Black man right now.
And that's serious. I mean, that's how you know something's good, when it makes people that uncomfortable.
And we have to be uncomfortable. That's the thing that is the difference to me in generation. So there are ways we can make people uncomfortable now.
Yes.
You know, there are ways we can do that to spark the conversation, to check in with our own selves, to go, why does this feel, why is this feeling, and I think that's, and again, that goes back to, it's fun sitting in the meeting with my, producers in the net and the studio, and everyone but me and my writer are white, but holding space and real conversation with people who want to change, but they're serious about it. Not like, let's fluff it over because, it might not air here because of that, or, that's too much. No, they're like, let's go there. We need to be going there. And that's, it's funny because my dad was given that, and then it was stripped away from him because it was an era that no, they weren't ready for it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's like, but you hired Richard Pryor, so what were you thinking? Like,
Exactly. It's dollar signs. They didn't think about the deeper implication of what he had the responsibility in many ways to do with the airtime.
Right. And he let you have it. In those 4 weeks, he let you, I mean, it's real for real, And it was funny, and it's poignant, just like his comedy, but what people don't realize is Daddy, the thing about my dad, which is so funny, is he spoke to everyone. He spoke to Black people, white people, Asian people, like he spoke to everybody, and you walked away laughing, and his life reflected that.
Yes. When you came in studio, I don't know if I shared with you that I got one of the last interviews with Dr. Maya Angelou before she passed away. It was only phone, unfortunately. I would have loved to be in her presence.
Right.
But
still, that's,
Yeah, still, for me, it is one of the highlights of my life thus far. And I mentioned to her the whole, feature, the whole, what do we call it? Part of the episode was her character, basically like the woman who sat on the stoop.
Yes.
Talking to your dad as the character, kind of the neighborhood alcoholic, kind of roaming around, and what she saw in him, what she wished for him, poetically, how beautiful that was. And she said that time with him and getting to know what he wanted to achieve with that, and building that poem, building that exchange around how he sketched out that scene was one of her favorite moments of creativity, because she fully understood how he was conceptualizing this show and how he wanted it to affect people. And she was happy to be a part of that. So if I've never shared that with you, I wanted to make sure.
I love that. Thank you.
Because I think that's incredibly important too, that we sometimes think about creativity as being highly competitive.
Yeah.
And perhaps we're moving into a space where it's going to be more collaborative.
It should be collaborative. And I'm just going to share insight on this journey of creating the series. That's what I was talking with my husband about 2 days ago, because I said it was so great to sit with this woman that I'm creating with. And the only reason I'm not saying her name is because the studio needs to let everyone know she's on my project. So that's the only reason I'm not saying her name.
I got you.
But it was nice. It was nice to sit with this woman who I'm collaborating with to create the series, and have her sit in the meeting, and everyone was like, oh, we're really excited about this and this and this. We like these episodes. And she said, well, that's Rain. That's those are her words. And I'm really enjoying working with her. And it was just like, it was devoid of ego. There was no, well, and she could have, because every other person who we brought in before that and then got rid of did that. Never said I'm collaborating with or I'm working with, you know what I mean? Because there was that competitive, there was like, but my job's on the line, where she is so comfortable in who she is and her voice that I'm learning from her. And I said that to her because I'm humble enough to go, I don't know how to do this. Can you teach me? And she's like, I would love to, so that you can do it on your own. Like,
Yes.
that's where we need to be. We need to be like, I come on your show. Yes, it's good for me to talk, but I also come on because it's good for you to have good content for what your dreams and what your focus is. You know what I mean? Like,
Thank you.
that's what it's about. And it should not be competitive. Like, I get there's that competitive nature, but there's no race here. Like, and I don't mean physical race. There's no race to get somewhere here. Right. So we need to learn how to we need to really learn how to, and especially that goes back to my post-traumatic slave syndrome. We need to really learn how to be in empowering one another and not fall into, well, because of this, you get this, or because of that, like play into what our ancestors who were trafficked here, had to endure, and the divide that happened, between house and the field and the this and the that. And, no, we need to give to each other to raise and affect the changes we want to see. Otherwise, we're still holding that manipulative, supremacist, systemic stuff.
Yes, absolutely. I want to be respectful of your time, so just a couple more questions.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
In the development of the show, when you mentioned Norman Lear,
Yes.
I said, but of course. So, I mean, in an ideal circumstance, in thinking about your blended ethnicities, in thinking about the way that you like to storytell and his history of being able to make people uncomfortable and laugh at the same time, is this kind of the ideal production setup for you in terms of really developing this idea?
It's beyond ideal. It's like the dream come true. It's like, where else could I have landed? And I couldn't have done it any sooner. That's what's interesting. Like, this has been 17 years of me performing my show, people trying to manipulate your content or to change it or to make it more palpable for this or that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so working with that team, Brent Miller, and there's a beautiful woman there named Michael, and working with Brent and Michael, and then with the MGM folks, all coming together to share this space to go, here's what we need to do, that, and know that it's Norman because that's what he stands for, makes it like, thank you. It's like, and to hear him say too, I was supposed to do a pilot with your dad and Robin Williams, and it didn't work. He goes, it didn't work out. And he goes, and I feel like this is full circle because I get to now do it with you.
Yeah.
And it is the same irreverency. There is in that, but yeah, it is remarkable to be in that presence of someone who did All in the Family and the Jeffersons and, and A Good Time,
Yes.
like, to be in that element and have him get that voice and hold space for you, and that is awesome.
Beautiful. My final question is, when you look at where you are now, and it's part of what I'm going to do, a little teaser to explain the title of this series to people, so you'll understand where this comes from. When you look where you are now, where you've come from, and how you plan to proceed with all these beautiful gifts and talents you've been given, how do you characterize kind of taking the baton from your father and running your own race? What kinds of things do you feel you've inherited that you are continuing to build on with your own style?
Truth. keep telling the truth. You know, no matter what, you gotta just tell the truth. You got to be, you know, it's okay to make someone uncomfortable when you're making them uncomfortable with exposing a truth. It's not for the purpose to make someone uncomfortable to make them small. You know, my dad never made people small. You know, he did uplift and he did inspire, and I think that's kind of what he gave to me in this whole process of life. Like, you know, I might not have gotten the money, you know, but what I did get was the integrity.
Yes.
You know, and that honesty, and to keep walking in my shoes, and to learn how to hold space for myself. Now that's sometimes hard. Like, you know, it's hard as an artist.
Yeah.
You know, and it's hard as a Black woman artist that doesn't look like the stereotypical, you know, looks of what is supposed to be Black or what is supposed to be mixed, and what that, you know,
Right.
and holding space to find my own beauty and my own way of storytelling, because it didn't fit everybody's mold of how this story should have been told, you know?
Yes.
So
Yes.
those are the things, I think.
And that's a beautiful thing. I thank you so much. I
Okay.
can't wait to hear more about the show. And is the idea to do it right now as a limited series and then see if it gets renewed, or will you just be shooting the pilot and then wait and see?
We are getting ready to pitch to all the networks, but we're not pitching ABC. It's not prime time.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's more like it's streaming, because there you can tell, you know what I mean? You can
Yes.
tell it a certain way that you can't do on ABC, you know, especially if you're going to deal with Richard Pryor, you know what I mean?
Right.
And myself, like, there's language you can't have on ABC, but yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I can't wait. I will look to hear more from you about that. Would love to help, you know, bring more of an audience for us to be able to talk about it, because I know that the subject matter is going to prompt discussion, and all discussion that helps us analyze where we sit in the midst of our society right now is necessary conversation.
Yes, it is. And I thank you for having me to even have this, you know, there was so much compact into our talk just now, but thank you for, you know, having me.